What's the scariest thing you have found out about someone from your childhood, old friends, teachers, etc.? When I was about 6, my family and I were getting up around 4:30 in the morning to go up to Utah to visit family. Out of nowhere, my stepdad tells us to wait in the car and goes into our neighbor's house. It was a duplex. I'd never really met the neighbors, but I remember my mom would get pissed if I went into their yard to climb this huge-ass pine tree. Anyway, stepdad is gone for maybe 10 minutes when the police pull up and go inside as well. After like 30 minutes they come out with a boy in my primary school called Lucky ended up with permanent brain damage after his dad beat him up over the school holidays. He wasn't able to return to mainstream schooling, but I still saw him when his mom picked his sister up from school. She needed to swap to a van to accommodate his wheelchair. Our Year 7 6th grade U.S. English teacher hung himself. He had a crumbling spine and couldn't deal with it anymore. He was such an awesome teacher, always in good spirits even when you could visibly see pain in his face. Edit, wow, this boomed off. I appreciate all of the kind words. Pray for all those suffering similarly. One of my best friends and locker partner from high school was kidnapped by terrorists in Iraq. After a nightmare of 6 months, all went silent. We buried an empty casket in his memory 10 years later. Edit, thank you to all who comment with concerns and emotion. He still lives in his family and friends' hearts, but it is hard to imagine the terror he went through. My best friend's dad from elementary school was a rapist and murderer. It happened a year or so after I moved. My dad waited to tell me until the trial was over. Her dad got the death penalty. Kid I went to elementary school with, his parents divorced and the dad was stalking the mom. She got a restraining order, so he hunted her down and shot her in the head while she was about to head in for work. He drove off, police followed him, and there was a confrontation which ended in the police shooting him. 2 kids under 14 lost both parents in a few hours. My uncle was a child molester. Even worse, he and others ran a newsletter for people like him. When they brought it all down, the arrests were international. I knew a little when I was a kid, as my parents telling me why I needed to stay away from him. Once I was old enough and the internet got huge, I was able to find multiple newspaper articles about it. Oh, and he raped my father when he was a teen. My aunt, his sister, didn't believe him. He used to always be at family gatherings. My aunt. In kindergarten we had a classmate named Earl who was extra needs, nonverbal, and one day he didn't come back to school. We had an assembly where we learned he had passed away. His mom was there, and for whatever reason the principal thought it was appropriate to tell all the kindergartners how he passed. His stepfather had used a lamp to beat him to death because he was afraid of a thunderstorm and was freaking out. He was arrested pretty quickly. But JFC, that fucked me up as a kid because old friend from school, elementary through high school. He ended up teaching in our old elementary school, was well known for visiting over 30 countries, going on scuba diving vacations, etc. He coached at our high school. He was single until 43, and recently married about 2 years ago to a woman with elementary-aged kids, and they had a baby. It seemed like he was one of the good ones. In May he pleaded guilty to possession of child porn, including at least one video portraying masochistic SE. I'm sure this is just from years of horror stories, but it is really nice to hear about a military stepdad that doesn't end in "he would beat my mom and then us." Props to him for not just listening to domestic violence and thinking it's not his problem. My grandfather still is a pedophile and rapist with several dead women attached to him, and a victim he impregnated at 65, who gave birth when she was 15. He stole a lot of identities, mine included, and was found with a whole bunch of cocaine and guns. He went to prison at 65 for 60 years and was let out on compassionate release at 78. He is 82 and still kicking. My mother died of complications to her mental illness when he was first charged. I don't know if she knew it was coming out. That the boy who lived across the street and moved when I was 6 is still obsessed with me and my sister 30 years later, and posts ramblings on Facebook with our names, and that he is going to be with us. Pretty terrifying, honestly. I had a friend in grade school who was being raised by her single dad. She had a unique name and pretty face. She never talked about her mom, and she was super outgoing, so all us kids just made friends with her quickly. It was weird her dad never brought her to our birthday parties, even though she was always invited, but we didn't think much of it. A couple times she was allowed to ride the bus home with me after school, and we played and had fun until her dad came to pick her up. Later in about 15 years ago, my dad received a very good offer for work in Iraq as a construction specialist. He was considering going, since at the same time the financial crisis started in Europe, but then one of his friends, a civil engineer, was kidnapped. Never returned back either. I live with chronic spine pain and can definitely understand. I'm almost 50, and when doctors talk to me about senior years, I laugh at them. You're always self-bargaining to keep going, but there's no way I want to be that miserable crouched over pain-stricken old man. My old t-ball coach when I was like 9 got arrested a year later for raping a kid in the bathroom of an amusement park. After that, more charges came forward for other events that happened previously nobody knew about. Girl I went to high school with became a teacher and molested one of her students about a decade ago, or as she said it, was having an affair with a 15-year-old boy. She was a married mother of 2 in her late 30s. Didn't serve any jail time. Disgusting. One of my best friends from grade school was being sexually abused by her father. I found out when we were in our teens after her parents divorced, she told me. My dad knew he had been fired from his job for sexual harassment problems with women, and that he was basically a slimy guy. I never knew why I couldn't sleep over at her house when I was younger, but my parents were fine if she came to our house. Glad my dad was paying attention and looking out for me. My elementary principal got fired because he had a fireworks business on the side and stored them in the school basement. Don't know if it was scary, but I grew up with a kid whose birthday was the day before mine, so we almost always shared birthdays in elementary school. We were friends, even spent the night at his house growing up. Later on in our teens, he started getting into some really dark stuff. I recognize that now as his being a sociopath, but like most everybody else at the time, figured it was just him going through some kind of emo phase. Over the years, we lost touch, but I would occasionally argue. A neighbor died when he was 30, drug overdose. Police searched a trailer he owned and found weapons, bombs, and a list of people he wanted to kill. My uncle was on that list. This is so sad. I think this is the saddest thing I've read on this question. Compassionate release. I know he's your grandfather, but I don't see how he merited that kind of compassion after all he did. OMG, a lot of teachers shit on here. Where are these teachers finding the time and energy? I'm in bed by 8 most nights. My best friend of 26 years was watching my kids this last Mother's Day so my amazing wife and I could go out. My 11-year-old daughter found 2 cameras in the bathroom, one in the bath while she was showering. Turns out he had been doing it for over a year. I came home right away, she texted me, and I took his laptop and cameras. He tried to deny. Tried to tell me it was a one-time thing, and he just needed help and it had all been deleted. Tried to blame me. Tried to bribe me. Tried to tell me that a girl I went to school with who bullied people died pregnant in her 20s after her husband consistently beat her when drunk. My mom's bio dad did the same thing to her. He was in a sex cult. He did horrible things to her all throughout her childhood. Sadly, her sister and brother don't believe her because they claim they would have known or remembered something happening to her. She suffers with a lot of mental health issues and physical issues and has the medical proof of it. But they just don't, and it's caused a huge rift in the family. He never got in trouble because she didn't remember it happened till. OMG, I hope she is okay. That is terrible. When I was growing up, we had these neighbors. When I was in 8th grade, their nephew moved in. Fast forward to about a month ago, I find out that the nephew of my neighbor from childhood murdered his roommate. Cut his body up. And carried his fingers in his pocket. When confronted by police, neighbor's nephew willfully gave the fingers to the police and stated that he carried them around because people were looking for him and wanted proof that he murdered his roommate. I recently Googled an ex who I thought was the worst person I'd ever met by time we broke up. I'd already heard some awful things through the grapevine. She has so many arrests. The saddest part was seeing that she managed to get her younger sister involved and they have multiple arrests together. Her sister's doesn't have any arrests without her. Her younger sister is special needs and has a mental disability. This is so much more chill than the entire rest of this cursed thread. This is why I love Reddit. Such different perspectives. Most would probably react with, "How are they even getting these teaching jobs in the first place?" Or, "Why are there so many perverted teachers?" Or, "Damn, it's disturbing how we trust those people with our children." But then we have, "I couldn't do it, I'm too tired. LOL. In elementary school when I was 12-13 I had what seemed like a stalker write me a ton of very creepy vile emails. I say they seemed like a stalker as they would write in painstaking detail what I looked like at school, right down to degrading me for every news that popped up. These emails became more crude and threatening over time until one day my friends I were talking to a group of boys 1 year younger than us. When telling these boys about the emails how frightening they were, I recently found out that a guy I sent to school with got into a car accident that killed his 8-year-old son. I also know someone from school whose parents were killed in a murder-suicide incident. Both are so very, very sad. Oh my God, something similar happened to my mom's personal trainer and friend. She had just gotten engaged to a really great guy, and she was pregnant with his baby. She also had 2 daughters, one was 12 and one was 16. Her and her daughters were at McDonald's and were just walking out the door when her ex-husband, the girl's father, pulled up and shot her dead in the street in front of their children. Then, he drove away and shot himself. I knew a 10-year-old girl who killed her mom and dad and staged it to look like a murder-suicide because she wanted to be adopted by the next-door neighbors. I sat right next to her on the bus. As soon as you mentioned a teacher and his extensive traveling, I knew what it was going to be. Makes me sick to my stomach. I'm glad the piece of shit got caught. Finally, a story involving consenting adults. I had a friend I wasn't super close with. We had worked together and socialized due to common friends. I saw her once when we no longer worked together, and she looked pregnant, at least 7 months. When I congratulated her, she said she wasn't pregnant and had a cyst. I felt pretty bad about my faux pas. Fast forward to a couple years later and our mutual friend tells me she's been arrested for throwing a newborn in the dumpster. It eventually comes to light that she has done this multiple times. That my friend was a rapist piece of shit. Fuck you, Jerry. A friendly kid that I worked with in my final retail job went on to shoot up his school. My whole class, from ages 8-11, were taught to swim at the local pool by a man who nobody really liked. He was mean to us and would come into the changing rooms still mixed at such a young age to scold any misbehavior, among other telling-offs. One day, we got a letter from school informing us that teacher had been arrested for putting hidden cameras in the girls' changing rooms. He was filming us, little 9-year-olds, naked and getting changed. Many schools were contacted about it because my childhood friend and her mom were murdered by her stepdad. They were stabbed to death. I had spent the night there and had noticed my friend and the mom were very spiteful toward the stepdad, and I just didn't know what to make of it. I still don't know exactly what was going on behind the scenes. My college buddy studied for years and eventually became a middle school teacher. He then started talking to me about the Police song, "Don't Stand So Close to Me," and how some of his female students really turned him on. Luckily, he shared that thought with his teaching advisor, and lost his job. He's an accountant now. My math teacher used to fuck his students' moms. One of my classmates was shot in the head by his father for AD on his report card. He survived but was never the same. Dad, of course, went to prison. Not sure where Mom was. He still lived in the same house afterward. It was only a few blocks from my parents' place. There was this classmate a grade below me, but all grades shared the same drama class. She was weird and kind of off. I tried to befriend her at one point and was rebuffed. It later came out that she was actually an almost 30-year-old woman who would show up in a new area claiming to be a 15-year-old runaway. Kind of freaked me out. I'm not mad at that. Maybe it's the Florida in me, though. My childhood track coach got arrested for sexually abusing 2 children, and my elementary school principal got run out of town on a rail because she had known about the first one and hushed it up, allowing him to continue teaching and eventually abuse a second child. The Catholic bishop who confirmed me was accused of a remarkably similar cover-up. When I was about 9, a kid I knew vaguely through a neighbor went off the deep end. He killed his little cousin with a rock, cut off pieces of his fat, and tried to eat it. The murderer kid has FASD among other things, and had a dysfunctional home. When he was found guilty of the crime, he was placed in a psychiatric institution. He will spend the rest of his life there. He has escaped twice. I'd say they lost their father the second he let his rage and jealousy consume him, and drive him to begin stalking their mother. He wasn't being a father. His thoughts weren't even on his kids and their wellness, except in the context of controlling them too. Otherwise he wouldn't have jeopardized it. I feel confident saying it because my dad would have stalked my mom if he thought he could get away with it, but he had too much attention on him. When that heat simmered down, he stalked me ins. The head coach of my first club volleyball team turned out to be peeping on the girls. I literally begged my parents to let me switch teams because he gave me the creeps. I didn't know what he'd done until years later, when I saw him refereeing high school volleyball matches. Confused, I started chatting with people, and found all this out. Apparently it was part of his rehabilitation. Sure. He wasn't allowed to coach, but could referee. Please make sure the authorities in your area know about this and file for an order of protection. Red heart stalking is very serious, and you do not deserve to live like this. Forgive me if this is a stupid question, but what were the circumstances of the kidnapping? Was your friend serving in the military at the time? That sucks. Even though she was a bully to people, she didn't deserve that whatsoever.